This is all the stuff you normally don't see me do on camera.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
All
so
the behind the scenes.
you're good to go?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yep, all right.
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Excellent. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another HMG podcast. I'm here with Daniel, I'm Daniel, and I'm here with Jackson. And today, we're going to talk about our recent event that we went to, Skulls. Now, so Skulls is a typical event that we run, and we've talked about on the show multiple times. They get run every now and then. Different formats, different ways of building lists, and different missions that come forward. So we thought we'd talk about the most recent one because, well, predominantly I'm here with the winner for both days for Best Allied General. It was Allied, wasn't it?
Yeah, Allied. Yeah, I've turned coats for this weekend.
He normally plays Axis, which is what threw me a little bit. But we'll go briefly over the format and where we can link that in the description for the players pack, which gives you all the rundown of everything. And we will just have a look at overview of the event, how the mission pack and selection went, and then some of the things that were a bit different, such as the spinning of the wheel to decide over the 2-day event. There were 2 separate 1-day events that were back-to-back. Jackson attended both and got a nice clean sweep for his allied forces. I could only make it to the first day. But I took a very interesting list and had some very interesting results. And we did play each other on day 1, which was a very good game.
That was an understatement. That was actually probably my favorite game of the day, of the day, for sure.
Yeah, it really was. Well, look, we'll get to it. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Skulls. This one was called Wheel of Fortune. I think there were a lot of words in the title, I admit, and I wasn't focusing as much on the title as I was everything else I had to do within the mission. So we had two single day events back to back. So the player pool was slightly different because there were people like me that couldn't get to both days, but we still had at least 20 players per day, which was pretty good. And how many players do you think crossed over? About half the field?
Oh, look, probably at half the field. Sunday was smaller, so I think it was like 22 on Monday or on Saturday. And then I think it was like 16 or 18 on the Sunday, and probably about 10 of them attended both days.
Yeah, okay, yeah, so about half the field then, that's pretty good. We also had, again, notable absence of some of our other players that would generally want to attend, and that's just naturally work schedules and things like that in WA, with people being off and away and on holidays. But a very successful event. Yeah, I mean, Gorchin's in Japan because he gets a bit of a free pass. It's hard to play virtual like that, but a very interesting setup. So the 3 missions per day, 1,000-point forces, a minimum of 8 order dice, which was an interesting minimum to put in the pack, and then a maximum, I think, was it 16 or 15?
17.
17. Oh, see, I only got to 15 and then stopped because that's where my list was. But yeah, out to 17. But then essentially not really that many other restrictions outside of that. So we were able to bring an armored platoon if we want. It still had to be a single platoon across the board, but you could bring virtually any theatre selector. You could bring essentially any force, and that we had some very interesting lists that came in. And because we opened it up to theatre selectors from essentially any source, we had a couple of very interesting theatre selectors that came across as well. So, yeah, I'm just trying to bring up the copy of the players pack.
Yeah, I've got a copy in front of me. But yeah, the thing with the opening is obviously as much as the lists were open, they were still pretty heavily vetted beforehand.
Yes, they were.
And I know Justin, who was TRing, knocked back quite a number of lists. And then there was still some funky stuff there. But yeah, they were fairly heavily vetted. Everything was pretty well proofread. And actually, despite how open it was, I probably would have said there was only 1 or 2 lists that I would have said were really on the, probably more competitive end of the spectrum. There's lots of people just taking advantage of stuff to run funky things.
I probably would have sat in that category quite comfortably as well. We'll go into each list, I guess, in a little bit, but I thought there was a good balance of people bringing stuff because they wanted to bring it, as opposed to feeling forced into any particular meta choice. Now, yeah, Justin did heavily veto some of the things that were coming across because he wanted his events to be in a certain way, but everyone still had a ball. Everyone still had a great time. So I don't feel like we missed anything.
No, absolutely not. I mean, yeah, there was a huge spectrum of different stuff there, and he just made sure that it was a good enough spectrum that everyone had a chance in there. So there was nothing too bent, but at the same time, I mean, the competitive players got to bring out their more competitive toys, and the themey players got to really crack out some of the really themey stuff that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to build, like you.
Like me. So we didn't know what missions we were going to play on the day, so we knew that it was a possible pool of 6. And the way that we decided was to spin a wheel, like an old school raffle, lottery style, spin the dial. And we had colours associated with that. That was all pulled together, and those colours associated with the missions that we might play out of the 6. And the 6 were, so we had some standard ones, so key positions, no man's land, and meeting engagement were the standard rulebook missions that were pulled across. And then we actually had 3 from the Board Action Alliance Players Pack, which is Heartbreak Ridge and Nuts. And then Blockbuster, I think, was actually a separate one. It's out of a campaign book, isn't it?
No, Blockbuster's one of Gorchon's.
Ah, that's right. That's right. I do lose track of so many missions now that we're trying to trace where they come from.
Yeah, there's a lot out there.
Yeah, I think I'll be thinking maybe block out. I've been reading a couple of campaign books in the background, getting confused. But yeah, so Blockbuster, which is an interesting mission. So on day 1, we ended up playing. We started with meeting engagement.
It was kill points. It was meeting engagement.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, meeting engagement to start, and then it went to Heartbreak Ridge, and then it went to Nuts. And so I don't get to play those other 2 missions that frequently, so I was very happy that that I got to play Heartbreak Ridge and Nuts in an event space, because typically when I'm playing and either doing rookie games or catching up with other people, I don't often get to play some of the more special things that we put together, so that was very, very nice. So we should probably then, I guess, lead into... so essentially, victory points was win-loss draw with victory points themselves as the tiebreaker. But the lists, this is where the interesting part happens, right? So, Jackson, I'm happy for you to walk through what your list were, because you were on the Allied side and I was on Axis, and so our initial matchups were all done randomized. We had a lot of... throughout the weekend, a lot of blue on blue from what Justin was telling me, but overall we seem to have a couple of sensible matchups. Well, I suppose ours may not have been as sensible.
Yeah, so one thing we didn't mention is that Justin gave every player a free intelligence officer.
Oh, yes.
And there was some funky stuff associated with that, but everyone got a free intelligence officer, which was really interesting to see over the weekend. And it was interesting. I mean, the thing that makes me chuckle about the intelligence officer is that every time you go to use it, it's not because, they're getting intelligence and they're telling someone something that they don't already know. You're off 9 times out of 10 when you're calling in your intelligence officer, there's a dude sitting there with a flamethrower 6 inches away from a squad, and your intelligence officer is screaming at these guys to get moving and gun them down like they don't already know that that's a priority. But my list, I'd kind of decided I wanted to try and be a bit more on the competitive end of the spectrum for this weekend. So I didn't actually stick too much to a theme like I normally would ordinarily. I also wanted to treat the weekend as a bit of a crash test for Cancon, which I'm wanting to go to in January. I've just got to finalise flights for that. So despite the fact that the formats are very different, I wanted to build my list around a set of tools that I was intending to take to Canberra. So my list was a CeeLo Heights list, which I'm sure everyone is growing at. I sold my soul to run that. I initially started out with, the Jules Stewarts and all the competitive stuff. And then I actually went through and I stripped out everything I thought was competitive and replaced it with something else. Still a nasty list, but a very different list to what I started with. So regular first lieutenant, I ran in with, or regular second lieutenant, sorry. I ran in with 2 orderlies, and then with the intelligence officer, that's a 4-man squad. Gave them all submachine guns. 2 regular guard squads, 8 men, Panzerfaust in each, just rifles. Another 8-man guard squad, 5 submachine guns in that one, and a Panzerfaust. A 6-man motorized reconnaissance detachment squad from the Fortress Budapest book, with a flamethrower and 3 submachine guns. And then a pair of medium mortars with spotters. Took those regular to get the benefit from the spotters. I originally wasn't going to. I was going to run them inexperienced. That was a decision I became very glad about that I made to upgrade them to regular over the course of the weekend. And then a comms omelettes for the motorized recon squad, because you can't go wrong with one of those, although it really is just a crap Bren. And then truck, Ziz 3, vet sniper, a Katusha, and an Su-76 with the howitzer ammunition as well as the AT.
Yep.
Pretty sure that was everything. And free squad, obviously.
Free squad. Yep. I was going to say they're probably the only thing you haven't. Yeah. It was quite a solid list. It was one that was quite a challenge to, especially for my list, to figure out how to engage with. And so for those viewers that weren't aware of any of the posts that I put up or pictures that I put up on our groups and the chats, my list was based on the motorized Flak Battalion 614, which was essentially 1941-42 sort of space. Panzer I hulls with 2 centimeter flak guns essentially mounted onto the back of them in haste, and then they were sent out to the Eastern Front, which they didn't do too well at all. Historically, they were there because Germany needed more anti-aircraft defense, and all the planes were busy or shot down, and so they were like, right, well, we need something, and so it was a bit of a stopgap to use excess material. They were not suited for the terrain. They were not really well armored. They had a gun that was okay at the beginning of the war, but very quickly, a 2 centimeter flak didn't really cut it for the sort of defense they were looking for. But they were mobile, and they did exist. So my selector was a German armored platoon with a SD KFZ 265 command tank, which I'll talk a bit more about in a moment. 4 Panzer I hulls with light autocannons, a second lieutenant in a Kübelwagen, 3 8-man squads of here soldiers just with rifles and submachine gun on the NCO, all of those mounted up in a truck each. I took a quad flak because they were in support of the platoon, which had a tow. I'm trying to think. I think pretty sure that's about it. But as just from the vehicles that I rattled off there, it was like 9 vehicles. Not any of them having an armor higher than 7+, and majority of them with armor of 7+ being open topped. The SD KFZ 265 was the only enclosed armor 7 vehicle, and it had a hull mounted machine gun. There is not a legal way to have that command tanks in a tank platoon, because in the selectors or in the unit entry, it's allowed in all theatre selectors excluding, and it puts a couple of exceptions, and then reinforced platoons, which of course an armoured platoon is not one. So the command tank can't actually be in a tank platoon. So I wrote to Justin and I just said, look, I've got this really crazy idea. I want to put this command tank in. It's technically not legal, but my alternative is actually to run a Panzer I hull with dual machine guns as the command tank for the same points, and an extra machine gun that's on a turret. And so Justin was like, so you're handicapping yourself but by reducing a machine gun and making it hull mounted, and you're not really gaining anything whatsoever. Look, do what you want. I don't care. So I was allowed to field with that, which was a nice little bonus. And I got to say, that little command tank, it only died in one game, and that every other game that it was alive, it was just harassing, but it was fantastic. It was really good. My obviously intelligence officer went with the second lieutenant, and they all had assault rifles because I needed something with a bit more guns and range in the rest of the army. And all the infantry squads are essentially the weapon crews that would have manned the flak panzers themselves, which is why there was 8. It's why there was 3 sets of them, and so it's a very heavy themed list. Basically, half a true platoon of what motorized flak battalion 614 would have been, and I performed probably a little bit better than what history would say. So round 1 is probably going to be the interesting game for us to talk about. I'm trying to remember exactly what happened. It was it's a whirlwind of a weekend. So you and I faced
and a big effort. Yeah, and that was an experience, because I was just looking at your list going, if I don't handle multiples of these flaks early in the game, I'm going to be in all sorts of trouble, because everything in my list is squishy enough that 2 centimeters is more than enough. 2 centimeter flak gun's going to do more than enough damage there. Meeting engagement, so just plain flat old kill points. Table we were playing on was fairly good line of sight, but lots of hardcover fences everywhere, a fair number of ruins. I believe you got the choice of tableside.
Yep.
Initially.
Yep.
So I didn't really get a say in that one. It became a really tight game. It was just a matter of me pushing forward, trying to get some kills on flaks. It's amazing how much will bounce off the front of an Armour 7 vehicle. They might as well have had 180 on the front. I think I landed a total of 6 hits with medium anti-tank guns, either off my ZIS or my SU, that bounced. The hit would go through, they'd bounce off the armor, or I'd set you on fire and you pass the auto check or whatever. I only managed to kill 2 of yours, and you just got ahead. I made a couple of mistakes there. I'd only played 1 game with my list. I really wasn't very familiar with how a lot of it worked. So I kind of bunched everything into a corner, tried to push forward, and I just couldn't get anything to convert. Meanwhile, firing stacks of rifle shots into trucks and stuff, and Kubel wagons, and not really getting any conversion on kills there, maybe immobilizing them. Dropping shots on flak veering, like the flak veering in your list, and with the mortars.
Even the flak gun. So about turn 3, the first mortar ranged in on the flak cannon, and we both typically at this point we go right. It's medium mortar. I haven't gone down because I'd already fired that turn. I was like, you're gonna hit 3 dudes. You're gonna kill probably 2, maybe 3 quite comfortably. Like it's fine. They're gonna bail. The unit's dead. So we killed 2, left 1 alive, and then I rolled like a 3 or something for their morale check, and I was like, I don't care, I'm just gonna whatever. And I'm like, that's not what that's not what should be happening. I think the other thing as well in to try and get people to visualize what happened. So I got to start with the first deployment dice as well, and so I deliberately put my Jeep with command team way over on the left flank and drove up behind some cover, which is predominantly where it had the best position to be for its purpose. And the purpose that I was actually running against Jackson after looking at his list is I wanted to try to get him to commit something to deal with it, and just seeing exactly what he'd be willing to commit on that side. As he said, he then started to basically put everything on that flank, and I was like, okay, so he's essentially giving me the other side of the board. Of course, there's not a lot of tools in my force to make it work, but I had chosen the side, so I had some good road entry, I had some good maneuverability of what I wanted to do. But yeah, there are certainly some things that the game was very, very close, but it would have only taken a couple of dire scores to change by like one or two in your favor, and it would have been either a really, really close game, like closer than what we had, or potentially your win quite comfortably. The the, the the big piece, of course, is you used your Katyusha argument. I wouldn't say wrong, but arguably you were, and we talked about it afterwards. You were too aggressive.
Not familiar with using it. Correct. Cancon.
Yeah, and then so so then I gave you some pointers as to things to this is what you need to, because I knew that you were lining up potentially to go to Cancon and just typically want to get better at using it, and so having used a Katyusha for a long time, I was just like, look, think of it more like this, leverage it like this, and apparently the next 5 games over the next 2 days you were ruining people's lives with that with that unit.
Yeah, look, so the whole point of that game, I guess, from the start, when you dump those 2 dice, the officer and in the field car, or the Kugelwag on the flank, I went, well, if I kill that, I'm 2 dice up, I'm ahead from the start, you have to come to me, my army's longer range, and you're a squishy armor platoon. I can pick off a unit every turn if I can get the chance. That obviously didn't go through. All that fire into that Kugelwagen really didn't do much. And then I decided to start taking gambles, and as you said, I threw that Katyusha forward way too aggressively.
Yep.
I think I'd kind of gotten to the point where I'd kind of absorbed the whole concept of, if I've got the mobility, I need to be using it. So I need to be throwing it forward to try and get the best possible shots. That obviously means that you're exposing it. And it is only a soft skin. And it's something, I'd never played it before, but I figured I'd give it a shot, and I was just throwing it forward, and it was just dying. You'd get off 1 or 2 shots, it'd die, game on. It might have fouled opponent's deployment, which is fine. That's always great. But in the terms of the long-term investment, it's better. I was finding, that advice you gave of, well, I can see what you're trying to do with it, but go for, if you can get that lineup on those 2 units, and keep it alive in the meantime, make it hard to get to.
Yeah.
Then that's infinitely better than aiming for that 5 unit sweet shot that might just tip a game if you roll hot. And in the end, that was the right call to make and the right advice to give. The game, as a result, like, it hung in the balance. You got ahead 2 dice. It became very much me trying to claw it back. And the flak guy, I just wasn't converting kills. You were doing great at converting kills, keeping stuff alive.
Yep.
And I think in the end it came down to that beautiful little command tank of yours pushing forward to go after a kill on a unit to secure that 2-point lead.
Yep.
And it exposed itself to the Ziz, which had been taking fire, but managed to survive. And it literally, last dice of the game, right before dice up for the end of the game, because of the calling of time, it was, I have a 50-50 shot. I hit on, I think by that point you got within 6 of the Ziz. You'd gone really aggressive after these other units.
Yep.
And you put some pins on the Ziz. I think I needed like a 4 to hit, and then I needed anything other than a 1 to kill, or one to penetrate.
Yep.
And I managed to roll that. The 2, 3, whatever it was. I can never remember that number designation.
Got the hit. Got the kill.
Got hit. Locally up. And that forced a draw.
Yep. Yeah, it was a game that went right down to the wire. Very, very satisfying to play. The terrain being lots of hard cover is always a bit of a challenge, because there's naturally the way that it works is you're suddenly looking at sort of 6s and 7s to hit most things at range. But I certainly did have some good conversions, and also just when firing HE, like I was getting a good amount of pin conversion when I was actually rolling that D2 across, and that plays a part in a few of the other games that I had on the day as well. But for a start of the game, that was it was a very, very very, very close match to get started with.
Yeah, I'd say for me it was my hardest match of the weekend. Just because once I started having to go aggressive, and then I was taking pins, you really put me through the ringer and made me work for every little bit. Yeah, that's probably my hardest match of the day because I felt like from second turn onwards I was starting on the back foot. Yeah, it was amazing fun.
Yeah, it's. I mean, one of the things that I tried. I don't get to play that often, but I like helping. I like helping develop our community of players to play the game differently. And when you have to face something as like even when I was designing that list and trying to pull it together, I'm not the first person to have done that sort of spam list on the flag panzers, but no one in our scene had done anything like that before. And I was like, this is going to throw a curveball for a lot of people. And all three opponents were just like, it's a fun list to play against, but and it's not overtly cheesy, but when you have someone that can pilot it well, that's really frustrating.
Yeah, it was really frustrating. And especially when you'd line up perfect shots, you'd get units suppressed, you put pins on stuff, and you just couldn't get anything to convert.
Yeah, 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 and having that command tank run around with so command vehicle plus a radio net on him, and it just meant that I could ignore the first two pins that were put on those light autocannons. So what about your? I've lost your video there, but I'll presume it'll come back.
Yeah, I've lost yours as well. I think it's a bit of an unstable internet connection
That's all
at
right.
the moment.
We'll keep going, and I'll put some pretty pictures up in the recording if this goes bad. So what about game two? Who did you verse in game two?
Right. So I wound up against Michael Andrews, round two. He was playing his funky German list. I think he'd kind of rolled the list out and gone, well, I'm here to have a fun time. I'm running some funky stuff. I think he'd got an extremely... so I play a bit against Michael and spend a lot of time chatting lists with him. And he'd play one of our other mutual friends, Jono, and got quite a convincing win beforehand. His list was basically... look, it was 12 dice, I think. It was the Landwasser Schlepper, the boat on tracks, the soft skin,
Yeah.
which is a pretty impressive unit to see on the table. It actually surprisingly good in a lot of ways. Great for blocking stuff off with. It's huge. You can hide so much behind it. It was that two squads of, I think it was 8 here veterans with like a couple of assault rifles and a couple of Fausts. Like really, really carefully built units. A couple of smaller squads of vets with light machine guns. A forward artillery observer on horseback. The G43 sniper from Tough Gut. A howling cow. A mortar, an AT rifle, a 5-man squad of Waffen cavalry vets with submachine guns. He used this in a really funky way. So yeah, we were playing on quite a dense Normandy table. Lots of roads, lots of hard cover, like center of a town. And we were playing, second round was Heartbreak Ridge.
Yep.
Which I've played quite a lot of. It's one of my favourite scenarios. I played it stacks into the lead up to Cancon over East earlier in the year. I've kind of got a couple of different formulas for how to set objectives up for it to give yourself, the best chance. So I managed to get objectives spread relatively over one side of the table, or as close as you can to one side of the table in Heartbreak Ridge, because obviously everything has to be in diagonal quarters. And he threw his right into his back quarter, and it started as a bit of a slow grind. He dumped his Schlepper and his two big assault squads of vets in reserve. He'd put everything else forward onto the table. He had some great enfilading fields of fire. The Howling Cow had brilliant line of sight onto a couple of central buildings. So approaching across the table in any kind of like dense formation was going to be a real issue. And so we just kind of started slow. It was a really weird game initially because neither of us were wanting to commit anything, but we're also trying to set up so we can rush across the table to threaten objectives late game. And basically I slowly advanced forward. I picked off a few bits and pieces. I got lucky. First turn I rolled on my Komsomolets on his flank, lined up his artillery observer, forced it to recce. So he didn't get to call down his arty barrage. And then second turn, obviously I'd forced it to recce back towards another unit. I rolled up the Katusha with one of those cheeky two-shot, like very hard to hit line of sight lines onto the unit next to the RD observers, and rolled a fluky 6 that killed them. That made my game a lot easier because it meant that I really only had to worry about the Howling Cow for area denial. So I started to push up. I threw a truck up really aggressively. There was a road that was running sort of at right angles across the table and parked straight in front of a couple of buildings he was using as defense, and under his guns. And I just threw my truck of assault troops forward on that, pushed everything else up. Managed to kind of grab the building in the center. He had units within 6 of it. They had started to push forward, which meant that I was under the guns for his Howling Cow. And then just dug in. His Schlepper refused to come on for the entire game till turn 6, so obviously he lost 2 full squads of vets and his officer, so a pretty large and substantial assault element of his. So once I was under that Howling Cow, I managed to just slowly pick apart unit by unit. I got a fluky mortar hit, I think, on his mortar that managed to stop that being an issue. And from there, it just snowballed. In the end, turn 6, he had a couple of units on the table that were pretty battered. His Schlepper came on, and by then I had basically a gun line around his objective waiting for it, and it moved onto the table. All my ambushes went off, the Schlepper died, and we called it there. So that was a pretty one-sided game. Michael gave it his best shot. His list was inordinately funky. That really threw me for a loop. He actually used his vet cavalry in a really funky way. He threw them forward, forced me to try and target them so they didn't get into my mortars and squishy teams at the back.
Yep.
Reckied away, and then once I kind of figured I'd had them pushed back enough, he moved them forward and dismounted them with the submachine guns and went, well, I've got a lot of submachine guns coming at you now. Now you have to bring something back to deal with them.
Yeah.
And that really threw me for a loop because, it goes from something of, I can't target it, so I'm going to have to ignore it, to, yeah, these guys have got submachine guns, they're vets. They're going to actually be a serious threat. That actually was something I'd never seen done before. And kudos to Michael, he loves funky stuff that'll throw people, odd little tricks and tools. He's great for pushing people. I always say to new players, if you can line up a game with Michael, do it, because he's going to teach you something. You're going to see something, like if you're looking at something from a competitive or like just seeing how the game works and what you can do with the game, for even in casual play, he's the person to do it, because he'll show you all sorts of stuff. But yeah, it became quite a one-sided game. It was fun, but I think we've already teed up to organise a proper rematch.
Yeah, it's
so that was a bit.
Yeah, it's a very interesting. Yeah, he does like to bring something that's a little bit off. Certainly off meta and certainly outside of what you would normally expect as a mixed bag. When he first sent me a message about the mounted air observer, my initial response was like, no. And then the more that I looked at it, because in terms of legalities, and the more that I looked at it, I was like, I mean, yeah, actually, like there's nothing that would stop you doing that. And he's gone, great, and he's figured out he's gone, I'm going to put it in my list, and I'm going to figure out how to make this work as an advantage. He's a very, very, very fun player to play with. So my round two, I played against Kane. So Kane had his US Marines, and I can't remember I think it was Derby's Rangers, and essentially in that theatre selector, you have the ability as the American player, if you're playing an attacker-defender scenario and you get attacker, you can then choose to apply night fighting or reduced visibility or dawn raid or flare as different scenario rules regardless of what's in play. And then because he's using a particular type of specially trained raiders, he gets bonuses to the line of sight rolls, and essentially you don't. So he goes in with an advantage. So we did a couple of things back and forth. I for the first round, and so he was like, he really, really, really wanted to play as attacker, and I was like, okay, I'll tell you what, let's just play it with as the attacker, because I was looking at my list and I was looking at his list. He had no vehicles, which meant that all of my autocannons would just be shooting at infantry, and I went, there's a possibility here that this is just going to turn out really bad, even if night fighting's in play. So I just went, okay, look, let's play it as the attacker. So we'll score it up at the end. We'll figure it out. It's fine. So we technically gave him a re-roll that he wasn't technically entitled to, but it didn't matter. I was like, let's just play the game and have fun. So as we went to set it up, you got to put the objectives down. You've got to put one unit down and then one additional unit, which is either infantry, artillery. So I put my command team down, and directly in front of my command team, I put my quad flak down in area terrain 1 inch away from, or just under 1 inch away from the edge of the base. So I can shoot out with no penalty, but I'm gaining cover, all that other stuff. And then he puts his stuff down, and I actually look at his list and I'm like, wait, like how many, like, you don't have a lot of stuff. He's like, yeah, but it's basically all veteran. Sorry, just a moment. It's basically all veteran, and I was like, okay. I mean, my autocannons at that point, I'm just going to treat you as regular anyway. But sure, you're veteran, and so when we were lining everything up, and he was trying to come on from moving and bringing things on his left flank. He had sort of 20 guys over there. He had 10 guys over on the far right, and he had another 10 in the middle. And I was looking. I was like, he's coming at me piecemeal, and I was like, this is great. I've got 48 inches on my autocannons. I'm just going to open up, and it's going to be wonderful. And then I realized just how important him being the attacker with night fighting was, because you roll 2d6, and that is the maximum that you can see, plus or minus any bonuses. Here's a hint. There's a lot of minuses. And so when you're firing at a small team in a ruin that goes down, and you're at range, you're essentially your default minus 12 inches to your sight roll before you roll the dice. And so you don't shoot at anything that is outside of 12 inches pretty much, unless you're shooting at a vehicle. Oh, well, my list is like 90% vehicles. So he was able to see me a lot easier in most cases and try and get some shots off, but he couldn't actually convert because you still take cover penalties, you still take all that other stuff. So I was making sure that I was protecting my stuff as much as possible, so that he wasn't getting easy shots. The dice in that game and the way that it worked out, both in order dice and as I started to capitalize, as I got a couple of kills and tried to roll things forward, and just simply the number of autocannon shots that I was able to put on units followed up by close fire. And I was at a point where it didn't matter whether or not I was going to get muzzle flash tokens on my guys and make them more visible, because I was putting pins on the only unit that really had a chance of doing them damage. So I started moving into a position of like, right, where I'm deliberately going to close the distance with you and just open up. So when we got to the end of that mission, we went to, it was objectives first, and then kill points as the tiebreaker. So we were tied for objectives, and so that was, I had 1 point more. I had the center objective under my control, and he didn't. So I had the 1 point win in that regard. But even on kill points, I was ahead on kill points as well, and so kills didn't necessarily matter, but I was stacking more victory points in on the side. I don't know whether he was assaulting a flak base and I just had my spotlights on, or but the damage that was dealt was pretty rough.
This is the game with the unkillable flak panzer, isn't it? The one that took a stack of bazooka shots that we could hear you guys like cheering and hollering about from the other side of the hall.
It took So there were essentially three flak panzers that I was running together with the command tank behind them, and then one of them crossed over and started advancing in the open with no cover, and it was shot at with a bazooka team 4 times, and he missed 3 times, and I think one of the times he hit and then failed to penetrate the armor, on an armor 7 open top Black Panzer with a bazooka, which that's pretty impressive that he failed to penetrate the armor.
Yeah.
So then on the 5th turn and the 5th shot, he changed target and immediately blew up one of the other Panzer ones. So we just figured that this other one was miraculously protected. And it survived being assaulted point blank as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we could hear you cheering from the other side of the hall. It was great.
It was one of the, like, we were both enjoying the game. We were both trying to play it out to a little bit of theme, and like he had his like his light mortar, for example, his 3-man team, like it trundled up and was like dropping rounds on me. I was like, I've got to deal with that, and I actually couldn't deal with it the turn that I wanted to, and I had to wait and reposition and go at it again, and so certain things like that were kicking across. But when it was all said and done, I physically couldn't get my models close enough to his unit, even with it. Like I was like, can I assault you and then leapfrog forward? Is there some way that I can make that happen? And I was about 1.5 to 2 inches short on the distance, even if I was ignoring the terrain, which we wouldn't have been able to anyway. He could, of course, but he never got close enough to actually really deliver a charge. The one charge that he attempted to do, he was reduced on his charge distance and then out by like 1/2 inch. And so I was like, well, you're going to have to fail the charge and drop directly in front of the target. The target happened to be the quad cannon, which then mercilessly went into 2s and just point blanked the unit with 8 light autocannon shots. So that was a bit rough, and it was very, very, very close. Like I would not have had the confidence to say you're not in charge distance. So like I thought he was going to make it when he put the charge order down, and he beat me to, because I was going to put my flak on ambush, and he beat me to the getting the dice out first. And I was like, well, you've used your intelligence officer, so I have to let you have this one. And then when he was just 1/2 inch shy and had to stop, I was like, great. But it was another game that was it actually felt a lot closer in the opening, like sort of 3 turns. There wasn't, because there was no shooting that was gonna like whittle his numbers down. So all that was happening was that 40 veteran Americans were simply getting closer, which was quite unpleasant.
There was a few lists like that. There was a few lists built around that kind of mechanic. I mean, Luke's Brandenburger, Sea Lion Brandenburgers were pretty much a very similar build, but for the Axis. And it really threw people. Like, I could hear people talking about playing Kane's list, hear people talking about playing Luke's list. I'd probably hazard a guess and say Luke's list a little bit does what Kane's list does a bit better, because of the way the Sea Lion Brandenburgers work. But it really throws people when they can't shoot stuff. It really throws people.
Yeah, and it turns bolt action. Not that it isn't a maneuvering game already, but it certainly exaggerates that element and goes like, you need to know how to maneuver against it, because you're going to have to be ready to react very, very quickly in a short space of time on the board. It was interesting, to say the least. And then
Absolutely.
now then we get into it. So that meant I had a draw, then I got a win, albeit a win just barely, because I held that center objective, and I kept Kane out of that middle zone. You had a draw, and then you had a win on that second round?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was I think it was it was a convincing win. I held all 3 objectives.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay, so that was quite big. And then into mission 3. So this one, I got to play someone who I'd never played before, I don't think, Rowan. And so that was a really interesting game. We both had armored platoons, except he had a Soviet armored platoon with an IS-2. Now, I went through my list and just double checked, even though I knew full well I had nothing that was going to touch the sides of an IS-2, and I went, that's okay. He's probably taken it as like, even though it's his command tank, he's probably taken it as inexperienced or something like that to help mitigate the cost of the points and, what that would... No, no, he took it as veteran. And what that meant was literally I could do nothing to that tank.
Yeah, I heard. I could hear, like, again. Like, for those who don't know, Dan is a very enthusiastic gamer, and you can hear him 3 or 4 tables down. And you can hear whoever he's playing, because usually everyone's getting caught up in the excitement of the game. And we could hear you going on about this IS-2 that you just could not hurt. Didn't he have some other tanks supporting it? And he had quite a good selection of other different tools, didn't he?
Yeah, it was good. So Rowan's list as the Soviet armor platoon, he had the IS-2 as the command tank. He had a T-26 inexperience with double machine gun tank. He had an OT-26, which is the flamethrower variant of a T-26. He had an Su-76. Let me think here. He had a truck for his free rifle squad. He also had a Katyusha. And then...
Didn't he have some tank riders as well?
And then he had 2 units of tank riders, a 5-man squad of veterans and a 6-man squad of regulars. No body armor, just straight tank riders. So infantry-wise, his list was very light. Didn't have necessarily a lot in it, but it was supported by not an unreasonable amount of guns or various types of armor. All of it arguably more significant than mine. I feel that we had a very open urban area on that board. So we had lots of roads, we had lots of buildings on the roads or around the roads, but virtually no scatter terrain and nothing blocking movement on roads whatsoever. So we had between my Jeep, his truck, and our different tanks running around and trucks, everything was like taking advances but moving like 24 inches double pivot. That's some serious mobility around the board, where it's like you can start doing things that normally that's just not attainable in one turn. And so he made a push with his T-26 directly towards my flak gun that I deployed centrally. And he just advanced at 18 inches and went, right, I'm just going to point blank shoot it. He didn't do anything because he needed the 7s to hit, but even so, I was like, right, well, that's a threat, and technically my flak gun may do damage to it, but I'm more likely just to pin it into non-existence. But that's going to take a couple of turns. What I did was I took one of my trucks towards the end of the turn and literally just ran it and went 48 inches one pivot and put it in his deployment zone. So I had a unit that was then like within a hair's breadth of his objective from nuts, from turn 2 onwards. This is nuts, isn't it? Yeah. And so we had 5 objectives in nuts, sort of placed and moved around, so we were both very much threatening each other's deployment zones very early. However, as the weight of the number of dice and as I started to immobilize his units simply by forcing pins on them and forcing him to take decisions about, well, my flak's going to open up on the Katyusha, I'm just going to fire my HE, and then I actually got enough damage on it so that the Katyusha ended up with some pins, and then I flicked across to one of my 2-centimeter ones that was just like, well, now I'm just going to kill the Katyusha, and just took it out. So similar to how I killed your Katyusha, where it was just one of my little tanks trundles on and goes, I'm just going to shoot at that, and just pop, 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 and blew it up. But most of his units ended up getting killed, and we ended up at the stalemate where he had one unit of his veteran tank riders that was sitting on an objective in his home territory. I had claimed the other one that was in his deployment zone. It was a 7-man unit that was in a building, and the only thing nearby was an Su-76 on 4 pins. So it wasn't going to hurt me because I could just keep adding pins to it every turn, being open-topped. I'd killed off every other unit that he had. And so through either attrition of pins or through just simply destruction and the number of autocannon holes that were put in stuff, everything else managed to get out. Of course, the IS-2, it was it was absolutely camping one of the objectives. I was not going to be able to get near it and hold it, but it also wasn't able to impact what was going on. So one of the benefits of my list is because there's 4 trucks and a Cooper wagon, those 5 order dice suddenly become movement blocking terrain pieces that I deliberately will get killed off and run them in front of the enemy to simply say you have to go around it or through it. Now, typically I try to do that with something nearby so it doesn't auto die, but I was in a position with, and I did it with you as well, where I was just like moving them backwards and forwards whenever I needed to take a shot with something, and then I'd put it in front when I wanted to block it, and then so you create a movable cover, that's there when you want it, but not when you don't want it. And I did a similar thing that was over there. I was like, right, I'm just going to herd everything around a little bit and just put these things in the way so that, sure, if you want to take a shot, you can kill a truck and I will lose a dice and that will hurt, but that means you're not shooting one of the autocannons, or that means you're not shooting one of my infantry squads. And so that became quite critical to just lock down line of sight and block things off and just reduce the opportunity for things to be done. So in I think turn 5 it was, just before the game ultimately finished, because I offered Rowan the draw at that point when we were equal on objectives, because if we'd gone on and played on to turn 6 or turn 7, whatever it was, he had 1 man against an 8-man squad on the center objective, and I was like, I'm just going to assault you. Like, I'm 7 dice to kill on a 4+ or a 5+ even, but you're only ever going to get 1 attack back, and I'll just go again and again and again until I kill you. So I was like, I'm not fanatic. I should get 7v1. I should get at least 1/5 in 7 dice, and so it should be an equal trade. It could all go pear-shaped, and then I'll just shoot you with a 2-centimeter gun, because there was one parked right next to the objective. So if he did survive, I was like, right, now I'm just going to hit you with an anti-tank shot point blank. But offered the draw because I didn't see that as a fair way to, we had less than 5 minutes at that point, and so I was like, I think it makes sense to do the draw here. He's fought hard. I'd blocked off the IS-2, so it wasn't genuinely going to impact anything further. We could have traded a couple of kills backwards and forwards, but the kills didn't matter. It was objectives in that one, so ended up on another draw. So I didn't lose a single game with my list.
It is a solid list. And coming back to what you said, I mean, the real trick with that list, and I think it's very much the mark of a good player, is the ability to throw transports around, as you were saying, and just blocking stuff off. And I see it so many times is transports gets used as a one-way cruise missile, and then people just pull them back. And it's like, well, great. That's fine if you're playing the kill points. Excuse the dog barking in the background. But if you're not playing kill points, throw it forward. Use it to fog things up. Use it to shut down avenues. Use it to block line of sight. They're amazing assets like that. And people will often say and talk about, I can't kill anything if it hasn't got a machine gun, therefore it has no value in my list. It's like, well, I disagree with that. You can throw that forward, and the ability for you to completely foul a tracked vehicle's movement or provide cover is just absolutely obscenely good, and it is game deciding.
Yeah, and I think there's when you can do it en masse. So like having 1 truck, for example, you can get some leverageability out of that. But when I have 4 in my list that I'm comfortable enough to, move around and do it with, it's like the idea of, for example, like boxing in one of my own infantry units around and just give them a line of sight blocking soft cover barricade by default, by just putting it in the way and getting it blown up. Those I can do that 5 times across the course of a game. Like that means I can get my infantry from cover to cover very, very successfully. Or if there's an empty space on the board that I'm like, I'd really like a bit of, truck-sized terrain there. Oh, okay, we'll just drive a truck there. It becomes a bit easier. So what about you for game 3?
Yeah, so game 3, we wound up against Matt Hemi. So Matt was running a Japanese list. And it was pretty run of the mill Japanese. Everything in it was regular, aside from a couple of suicide guys. It was a lieutenant and one man, 4 squads. 2 of them were the grenadier squads with a light mortar, and a light machine gun. And every squad had a submachine gun in it. He had a sniper. He had a flamethrower team. He had what was it? He had the machine gun squad, the reinforced machine gun squad out of Campaign New Guinea.
Yep.
Which is an interesting choice.
I like them.
It was 8 men. Yeah, it's interesting. I reckon they go really well as a pair of units, maybe not so much one. I think I had that conversation with him on the day. Really interesting choice. And throw out a lot of firepower at a decent range. And then he was running a Horo and a couple of suicide AT guys. So it was 12 dice to my 14. We were playing nuts. We were playing on my own personal table that I'd provided to Justin for the day just because we needed an extra table. It's a work in progress, so it is probably could do with a little bit more terrain on it. It had lots of dense terrain, lots of soft cover. But just needed a bit more hard cover on it. I actually quite enjoyed chatting to everyone who played on it afterwards, saying, what does it need? Got some great ideas for that. And again, basically, we're playing nuts. The one big thing is, when we started deploying objectives, I just threw all the objectives I could out into the farthest corners I could. Because given there was only 4 squads plus the machine gun squad, I was pretty confident that if I could force him to spread out, given how open parts of the board were, there was plenty of soft cover, but you still had good line of sight.
Yeah.
I was pretty confident I could chop units one at a time as they came at me, as he tried to hold objectives with them. And that's kind of pretty much how the game went. He very cleverly threw squads into outflank. Yeah. And went, well, if you're playing the corners, I'm going to play the sides. Which then obviously forced me into the center of the table where he could try and get some good crossfire on me from his 2 corner objectives. Obviously, that means that there's 2 big squads of Japanese that I don't need to worry about till later in the game. And I got fluky hits. Managed to drop 15 infantry in the first turn off indirect and long range fire. That's a third of his infantry, obviously.
That's a lot.
And it was. I didn't manage to concentrate hits on stuff. Like I was trying with everything I could to concentrate hits on one squad. But I got a fluky hit with a mortar. I managed to get a good lot of rifle fire off on another unit. And then between snipers and other like sort of scattered small arms, I managed to pick off a fair few guys in another squad. And that was really more a fluke of the dice there. And then from there, he pulled back, tried to pick off some of my units. I pushed forward, kind of keeping a sort of 18 inches around. And then once I had him boxed into the corners, I just started throwing down assaults. Yeah. And assaulting his units. Once they were down to sort of 4 men in the squad and I could reliably hit them first.
Yep.
The Horo Ada SC-76 shell, obviously the objectives being all spread out, suited me perfectly fine. He made a last-ditch push onto my back objectives, my back corner objectives, with his outflankers, and that caused me a fair bit of issue because obviously I'm most of the way up the table by then. But I managed to lock them down with some ambushes, and in the end that was 4 objectives to me, 1 to him.
Wow.
And we called it there. I think,
nice.
Yeah, he still had he had a couple of squads of infantry that were pretty beat up, but I managed to kind of clear out stuff on his end of the table.
Yeah, wow, that's very good. That's a 4v1 in nuts is not to be underestimated. That's a very challenging total to reach. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's trying. The trick was spacing everything out.
Yep.
Because once those objectives were far out, I mean, the terrain helped me considerably because obviously Japanese armies favor getting up close and personal, and it allowed me to um, direct his movement in such a way that I could lock him into corners and onto the flanks and force him out of the middle. But yeah, it was spreading those objectives out, forcing him to try and take them piecemeal one by one with individual assets, and then punishing anything that came forward.
Yep. Yeah, it's yeah. So Matt Hemmy's list was did he won best painted on the day?
He won best painted on day one.
On day one,
and Boiler won best access general day two.
Yeah.
He used the list really well. And it was a really cool themey list. I think given the horror, I think it was a Philippines themed list. Yeah, it was. He played it really well. I think that my big takeaway, because spoilers, I actually wound up playing him twice over the 2 days because they were run as 2 one-day events. I think the big takeaway for me was, especially with regular Japanese infantry, that 5th squad. Obviously, he had the 5 squads, but he only had 4 of them as push squads.
Yeah.
That 5th squad makes a big difference to how easily you can deal with things.
Yep.
Especially on open.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the essentially the gun section, the machine gun section, as opposed to a machine gun team. But as you suggested, running it as potentially 2 of them, as opposed to just the one. And the first thing that typically I would do is the first casualty that's removed, choose the gun model, and then you've just got another infantry squad ready to go that can move around as needed, which is something I've done in a few other different games. And it depends on where you set them up, obviously, but if you max out your infantry selections and then you get a bonus extra 1, it's quite a nice little bonus.
Absolutely. And they're quite a... because it's something that people think about twice because it actually has a lot more fire than a normal machine gun.
Yeah.
So people kind of go, well, it's a machine gun, and then they'll rush or treat it like a normal machine gun team. And then obviously it starts operating like a squad.
Yes.
Or they try and treat it like a squad, and then it goes, well, that's 36 inches away, I'm going to load it up with a machine gun. So if you play it clever, as much as machine guns are in a quirky place in bolt action and they're not the best, it actually has some really funky utility and can really throw people if they're not playing clever.
Yeah, it's also harder just to delete their because yes, the machine gun is a team, but you don't lose the order dice if a sniper shoots at them. You still have there's 7 odd guys that are left that are going to continue being a rifle squad. And Japanese with rifles, that's all you really need. Bonsai.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. So now, unfortunately, I don't have the exact scores of where we all ended up. I know that you obviously won on your side. I'm not exactly sure where I ended up, but with a win and 2 draws across the board, 3 fantastic games, a really nice set of opponents. The environment, the setup and everything we had was quite nice. I don't think there was any, even with, like, for example, your board of terrain, which we know is that you're working on those pieces, greatly getting feedback as well, because all the trees stuff and the dense terrain that's on there right now looks really, really good. And so it's also aesthetically, what is the next thing that you can bring into that from that point of view. But like, all the terrain looks good. We had some the club terrain, Andy Lawson's desert board again with his modular 2x2 tiles. There was a stack of things there that were really quite good and enjoyable. Did they change any of the terrain on day 2?
Look, they shuffled it around for day 2. One of the things probably worth mentioning for day 1 is that we had an even balance, an even split of Axis and Allied on day 1. And the Axis actually did really well day 1. I think the only player to go 3-0 was Jake. Jake's a local player who's been only playing a couple of years, and he was running like a Scherberg list. It was very much a machine gun German list, lots of machine gun teams, all kinds of funky stuff. He played it really well. He's been putting a lot of work in to get up to scratch, and I think he went through 6 months of hell where Michael and I beat him soundly for 6 months. He lost 20 or 30 games in a row, and came back, learned from it, and is now an absolute terror. But yeah, the Axis did really well day one. Day two, obviously, we had a very different field. We lost a lot of Axis players for day two. I think there was only 5 Axis players total, 4 who wound up playing all 3 games.
Yep.
We'd shuffle some of the terrain around. There was a lot more, obviously, Brits and Soviets and Americans for day two. So obviously that then also changes your dynamics because you're missing some of those other funky bits and pieces that you'd see if you were if there were more Axis lists. There wasn't as many armored platoons for day two on the Axis side. There was a Japanese armored platoon of Chiha Shinhotos.
Very nice.
That was quite fun. And then we had some Finn. So we ended up day two was 2 German lists, 2 Japanese lists, and a Finnish list.
Okay.
And then a stack of allied lists, and every table got shuffled.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, it's good. It's I think quite a good event. What we might do is because we know we were going to get a couple of other visitors on or some guests on for day 2 coverage. So we'll call this part 1 of Skulls, and then we'll get on the other people at another time for part 2, because I know Jacob wanted to be there as well. So Jacob obviously attended day 2.
Absolutely.
Yep. So I won't steal their thunder and jump on that one. But so what do you think? You've got a clean sweep now of Skulls. Do you think you're done?
Look, it's bolt action. Never quite done with it. It's the game I keep coming back to. I love it dearly, and Perth community is brilliant. I kind of I was going to Cancon. I was going with some mates. They'd said they were going. Then they had some lifestyle stuff come up. They said they weren't going. And then I played at Skulls. I'd obviously built a list that was similar to my Cancon list, some similar assets there in the list. And after Skulls, I'm feeling super pumped for that. So I definitely will be. That's my next goal. There's a lot of things I'd shuffle around in my list. There was lots of things I learnt from it. The Komsomolets is great, but not having a Pintle and being tracked, there's a lot of time you're not getting value off that machine gun on it.
Yep.
So a Brent carrier kind of is a must there. And then there was a few other bits and pieces. I'm toying with swapping out the SU.
They're pointed about the same, aren't they? Cosmopolites and the Universal Carrier?
So the Komsomolets is 60 points with a light machine gun on the hull, open-topped armor 7, and then a Brent carrier with the Pintle is 70 points. And with for 5-man transport. So it's 10 points difference. You add the machine gun, it just adds a lot of flexibility there.
Yeah.
I also didn't find myself getting a lot of value out of the reg infantry, mainly actually as assault units. So my big takeaway from that is I'm actually going to go, because Cancon's dual platoons if you'd like, or single theatre. So I'm going to go back to my roots of massed green and experienced infantry, because I always find I get better value from that.
Mm-hmm.
We're swapping out the SU-76 for a ZiZ-30, which is the Komsomolets with the ZiZ-2 mounted on top. Absolute piece of trash historically.
Very nice.
But it's fun. It's 5 points deeper. You lose the HE. It's armor 7 instead of armor 8, but you add the machine gun. And I found pretty consistently with the SU-76 is that it became a massive push element, but because it's only firing the one shot, it was so hit and miss.
Yep.
And having the LMG on the front, you lose the HE obviously, but having the LMG, I might toy with that.
Gives you an extra 4 shots, right? Like that's the thing. Like your ability to simply generate a pin is increased by having 4 extra shots. So yeah, it's interesting. Yes, okay, armor value, blah, blah, blah. I just ran Flak Panzers. You'll be fine in Perth.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And look, it's just one of those things. Like, you can toy with a list and toy with your list and toy with your list. At the end of the day, the big takeaway from Skulls, obviously, is we had a lot of people running around with lists that other communities would say aren't meta, aren't competitive. And that's just the way we do things here. But it was the player that made the lists, not the lists. So you can tinker and toy and fiddle with stuff, but at the end of the day, it is the player. Some of our best players were running really weird stuff, and they had a ball with it. And like, there's plenty to learn from it. There was plenty. I walked away. I take notes after games now. I write down things to work on, things to improve. Spoilers for day 2, but like, day 1 was great after my game with you for getting the most out of the Katusha, being a little bit more careful with it. I got lots of value out of it then. Day 2, that shift in how I was using it reaped massive dividends. And yeah, I applied what I'd learned in our game, what we'd had a conversation about, and yeah, it was brilliant. So yeah, there's plenty more. I guess what you're saying is that I want to do with bolt action. Not too fussed now. I've got a second dice bag. I've got 1 for the Axis and 2 for the Allied. Now, and they're kind of, I guess, bit of a prestige thing here in Perth is that the Skulls dice bags are highly sought after. So that's something I've been chasing for a while. But so not too fussed again where I come, as long as I keep getting to have some fun with lists and learning stuff.
Yeah, I might actually have to put some serious time into actually chasing one myself, because everyone's getting them except me.
Yeah. And not too many people, like, we've got a lot of people who've picked one up over the years, because the thing with Skulls is that our community just keeps getting better. And a lot of players have, and especially given it's a 3-game tournament, all kinds of things can happen in that, because you can dodge hard matchups. You can get a couple of fluky games with good dice rolls. You can play really well and someone else can have an off day. A lot of people in the community, just about everyone in the community has a good shot at it. And if they're not feeling like they have a good shot of it, they can play the other faction. They can play Axis, because they think, well, you know what? I don't feel like I'm going to be doing well with my allies. I want to give Axis a shot and give a shot at it from there. And it's good because it brings out the competitive players. It brings out the casual players. Justin manages to merge it all together. Everyone has a ball. The prize support is absolutely insane. And the community's great. We all go out for drinks afterwards.
Yeah, no, I would very much agree that it's in a good spot. And the even within Skulls, the variety of how we do how Justin does his mission packs, how Justin does his setups for, how you can select your armies, what's in, what's out. We have that feedback loop that we keep getting overall, and then anything that doesn't necessarily fit directly into Skulls, we then try and cater for with other events on the side, which is, again, some of those things that will start coming forward in 2024 as, providing all plans come to fruition.
Absolutely, and we're kind of in a good space at the moment in that we've got loads of different events coming where we're still working on building the community, but a lot of our competitive players are happy to play narrative, happy to play casual. We're running events probably every 2 months at the moment, to the point that players can now pick and choose what they want to attend.
Yep.
Which we haven't been in a situation like that previously. In the last sort of 12 months, people have been able to go, well, this is what I want to play at. Which obviously that does tank your attendance at times. It makes it harder to get above that 20-player mark.
Yep.
But at the same time, it helps ensure that everyone's there for the same reason. Everyone's there keen to do. Everyone goes, well, I'm going to this event. We know that this event does this, so I'm going to focus on this. This is the competitive. I'm going to Spartan. This is a competitive event. I'm going to Skulls. This is my best foot forward, have fun event. I'm going to Southern Thrust. This is my theme and visual appeal and weekend away kind of event. So you get people making choices about what they want to go to, and you don't get as many of those mismatched players who are going, well, these are the only events in the calendar. I want to be competitive. I know this isn't a competitive event, but I'm going to go to that anyway because I want to play bolt action out and about with the community and be competitive.
Yeah.
It helps.
And that's where, we also have Band of Brothers, Dueling Aces, Take Cover will return again next year in a more modified format. The Good Games Cannington Startup League stuff is ticking along. Tactics has reached out to say, hey, do you want to come and do something? And so even if we do like a firefight league at like a completely different sort of scale and setup, or maybe we do like 500-point patrol forces or something, we are gonna, where all those things come to fruition, we're gonna start getting to the point where it's like, no, it's actually probably close to one event a month across the year, and it will be a case of, what would you like to play? Here are the events that line up for that. What else takes your interest? Okay, here's the next part that you can go to, and that's outside of just the regular games people are like trying to catch up. So no, it's Bolt Action's in a really healthy spot. It's something which I take for granted sometimes, that we actually have in WA in general a lot of really good gaming setups in the different systems. But yeah, it's been a very interesting chat on day one coverage. I also enjoyed our game immensely. I mean, I really enjoyed the games with Kane and Rowan as well, but I could feel the strain in our game. The tension was very real.
And we were both having an absolute ball. Like, it was a
Of
good
course.
tension, but we were both there giving it our absolute best.
Yes.
And we were making choices. Like, obviously, you were going, well, I'm going to throw this forward as bait, and I went, well, I'm going to take that bait and try and get ahead while I can, and then force you to come back at me. And yeah, there was a lot of back and forth in that. Obviously, I got the fluky dice roll that forced it to draw. That possibly shouldn't have happened. But it was a brilliant game, and the weekend as a whole. I mean, Outpost 6030, big shout out to them, because I know they're always trying to grow their community. But they always put on a good venue, a good event, good weekends. So if you're in Perth and you're there for one of their open days or one of their two Skulls events, make sure you go. It is probably, in a lot of ways, Skulls are our two flagship events that the broadest cross section of our community could try to go to. And yeah, Outpost is always good to go and support there, play games there on a Tuesday. I know they're always trying to get more guys gaming in on a Tuesday night. It's fairly central, so it's pretty accessible. I mean, except for the Albany boys and some of the guys up in Geraldton who are driving 4 hours if they want to do something like that. But yeah, it's just, Bolt Action's a good game.
And if South Perth feels a little bit of a stretch, let us know where you're from and what game you want to set up within Perth, because there is a good chance that we know gamers that are nearby. There's not many suburbs that we can't. Yeah, not many suburbs that we can't connect people in some way, shape, or form. At least point you in the right direction. Excellent. Well, so this has been a slightly shorter episode because we're only going to do the part one for now. However, we will see you all very soon. All right. See everyone.
Yeah.